Reddit users, what is the most eerie matrix glitch you have encountered? I only dimly recall the event, but one night very late, both of my grandparents were awakened by a loud noise. My grandmother swore it was a shotgun, and my grandfather claimed it was a car backfiring because no one would be shooting nearby. We lived pretty, they argued about it for a while before going back to sleep, because they lived far from anyone but close to a highway. About 15 minutes later, the phone rang, and it was my aunt. Her husband had been shot with a shotgun by a neighbor 20 minutes earlier. The problem is that they lived 7 states away. Did he survive? No, point blank in the chest. Did you know why the neighbor shot him? He was attempting to mediate a dispute between neighbors, and from what I've been told, he was approaching the man and talking to him. In 7th grade, I had a very vivid dream in which a white cargo van was parked outside my house, and a man got out, walked to my house, and broke in, going to kill my brother in his room. And when I woke up at 3 in the morning, I was terrified. Did you even check on your brother to see if he was still alive? I couldn't sleep, so I walked into the kitchen and turned on the light. A few seconds later, the headlights of a white cargo van outside flipped on, and it drove off. Indeed, we shared a bedroom. I woke up after the man killed my brother, so I'm not sure if he was planning to kill me as well. I've never died in a dream, so perhaps that played a role. My mom has some friends that I've known my entire life. They're her age, and when mom wasn't dating, they used to watch me occasionally. When I was 4 years old, they took me trick-or-treating around their apartment complex for Halloween. Fast forward 27 years, and I'm married to a girl I met in college who was born in the city where I grew up, but moved away almost immediately when she was under a year old. She had grown up in different parts of our large metro DFW and the LA area. My wife and I throw a Christmas party to celebrate our new home, and my mom asks if she can invite these family friends. I said, of course. They arrive, and we start talking. They ask about my wife's unusual maiden name and whether she knows anyone with the same first name. As when my now wife was born, I was 3 years and 9 months older than her. These family friends of ours were her parents' neighbors, meaning that they shared a wall and the only other door on the 2nd floor of the same building. When I went to their house for a visit, I met my future wife. I once got into a strange and complicated situation with a girl, who later turned out to have been born the same day in the same hospital, and our mother shared their hospital room with us for the first few days of our lives. My wife was in a complete state of chaos when she was a baby, and I didn't see her for another 18 years or more. We grew up only 10 miles apart, but aside from that one time when we were 20, we never really met, which was strange because we had some strangely similar life events. She was the first girl I ever met, and it's kind of a shame that she never went anywhere. Dude followed that. It's fate. I was born the day my grandfather passed away, and I've always been known to be remarkably similar to him, despite the fact that we have no biological ties. In the end, this whole thing just fizzled out until it was just friendly birthday wishes every few years. Stepfather apparently, when I was around 5 years old, my family was discussing him and passing around a picture of him. I had never seen one before, so I pointed him out and said, "Oh, I know him. I saw him on the way down." Mom says her heart stopped, although I'm known for being witty and sardonic like my grandfather. We assume I mean on the way down from heaven or the afterlife, pre-life, but everyone in that room swears it's what I said, so who knows? I honestly don't think that was my intention when I was 5. Edit, Gez, this blew up, and I was around 5, so I honestly don't remember. My great-uncle, whom I hadn't seen in years, called me later that day and wanted to talk about the same thing we had discussed in the dream. It scared the hell out of me. I had a similar experience the night my grandpa died, but I didn't know until afterwards. The following morning that he had passed away, but in my dream, my father, brother, cousin, and I were sitting on the deck of the house where I grew up, drinking whiskey and laughing. It was a very long dream in which no words were spoken, only emotions and laughter. It might not have been the same kind of system glitch, but it was one of the strangest. My great-uncle wanted to talk to me about his impending death. His children abandoned him when they were each 18 years old and didn't even friend him on Facebook. Now that he was in his 80s and dying of cancer, they were being very kind to him. He left everything to me, and his children are suing me for it. Manipulate him despite my attempts to persuade him to simply donate everything. I had posted earlier in the year, a year ago. My mom and I were waiting in the first parking space of a small shopping mall while she prepared items for the store. I'm not sure why, but a big white SUV was parked in front of us. When I usually don't even pay attention, I felt the need to study the SUV. The family who owned it came out with a father, a baby in a carrier, and a young girl. The girl stared at us the entire time her father was loading her into the car. She had a side ponytail and a huge, oversized bow in her hair, and she just kept staring. We went into the store immediately after the entire family was in the SUV, and when we went to open the door, the same family emerged. The funny little girl, the father, and the baby were still holding shopping bags. They walked to the driver's side, and she didn't take her eyes off of us. The father packed her up, and my mom also stared at her. We were not the only ones who saw it. A worker from the food establishment next to the store also saw it, and we all exchanged horrified looks. I'm not sure how he managed to get out and dash into the store in the few seconds. It took us to walk to the sidewalk in front of the store. What this was, but I can assure you that not many people have accepted my mom and me. I would assume you saw the pass-through wormhole. Did you speak with the store employee? No, we didn't. However, another man saw us both and gave us a horrified look. Dude, this exact same thing happened to me years ago, and I was rushing to catch it. As I was getting on the train, I noticed a man getting off the subway. His attire matched the weather, which was chilly in late February. He was wearing khaki shorts, a purple Life is Good shirt, flip-flops, and a beach bag. After a few stops, about 5 minutes later, we pull up to the platform, and the door opens. I can't explain it, but I had a dream about my ex-girlfriend before I met her. She had red hair and hazel eyes, and I was on an express train, so it was moving even faster. The same guy is waiting for the train from where he got off to that stop. There was no chance he would get there above ground. Funny enough, a few years later, I now live in the apartment building where that corner is, and I smoke in the back lane to avoid looking at it. Long before I met my now wife, I had a dream about her. She was crying and holding a purple luggage bag at the intersection of 3 streets. It turned out that was where we would be when we broke up. Later that day in class, my dream came to me, and I jotted down in my notes how she looked, where she lived, and a few details I remembered. A year or two later, when I was beginning to lose confidence, she appeared. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy, to be sure, but the details were accurate. And I even showed her my notebook, and she concurred that it was rather strange. She also had a very vivid dream about my daughter long before we had her. She turned to face the young girl in the passenger seat and asked, "What do you think? You're smart." The girl simply nodded. The wife's response was, "You let our future child sit in the front and without a booster." Chair all right, so I have this memory that no one will believe. But here it is, when I was around 10 or 11. My mother was constantly berating me for not doing my chores. She was downstairs with me, so I ran upstairs to get away from her. By the time I reached the 2nd floor, she was in the kitchen doing dishes, and there were no other ways to get there. She grinned, and I nearly, when I was around 14. I went to bed at my usual time and woke up 2 days later. I walked downstairs in a panic, wondering whether my family knew I had been asleep for 2 days and what had happened. "Did you tell her that I had shot myself?" She laughed and told me to go do my chores. Was disregarded, and they instructed me to sit down and eat breakfast. How did you handle that? Well, nobody would listen, so what else could I do? I had a suspicion that my dad might have added something to some food or drink, but I didn't want to get ahead of myself because I wanted to keep my sanity. But I recall falling asleep in the middle of the afternoon, waking up an hour later, and then going to bed at 4 o'clock and waking up at 5 o'clock. I thought I was just napping, but I actually slept for 25 hours. This occurred during the summer, and my parents claimed they simply assumed I was at my friend's house. It was a strange feeling to consider missing a whole day of school. I am aware that when I was 15 or 16 years old, my parents used to leave me home for several days at a time. They maintain that this never happened, but several of those times happened after I had suffered a serious injury. and needed to take care of myself. I once tore every muscle in my right shoulder, and it took me around a year to recover. The function is good now, but more than 25 years later. I broke my left distal metatarsal at around the age of 16. I remember having a full driver's license at the time, so they were not present. They don't remember any of the injuries, and they never left me alone for several days. Because of my broken foot, I had to drive my 5-speed car with just my right foot. I remember telling them that I couldn't drive on my own because I couldn't use the clutch, and they ignored me. They said that none of this occurred and that they would never have left me home alone. For a day or longer, I idle it out with my right foot, then move my foot to the throttle and shift on the fly without the clutch. They also have you can see the scars on my body and feel the bump in my metatarsal from the brake. But they wouldn't take me to the doctor because I could show them all the scars. I can also recall the injuries that made me stand up without screaming, wear a neck brace for a few weeks, or hop on one leg for a week. Still claim that they don't remember. To be fair, they were quite busy at work at the time, and I'm fairly independent. But come on. I'm fairly certain that I had Stepford parents for roughly 4 years prior to attending college. I wouldn't call it the Matrix other than the fact that they don't think these things ever happened. It's sad and almost sounds like your parents are gaslighting you to feel better about leaving you alone. I'm sorry to hear this happened. It's quite possible that it was a difficult time in their lives, and they were arguing about getting a divorce. My brother does remember this stuff. Or not, in addition to other family issues I know I could handle. They simply acted as though they were still together and everything was fine. I like to act like it was something inexplicable because it makes for a good story. I'm 40 years old and have been over it for ages, but I keep noticing that obviously I don't remember this. But when I was around 2 or 3 years old, my great-aunt and grandmother had just returned from Scotland, and the family was invited to view the projection slideshow that showed my age at my grandparents'. I wasn't very old at the time, so I thought I might share mine a little late as usual. I was intrigued until I saw a picture of a big lake or pond with some ducks. I said, "I know that place." Of course, everyone said, "That's not possible. It's on the other side of the world." I then got grumpy and claimed that I used to live there with my white-haired mother. After that, I mentioned something about my horse and that I lived in the castle up there. My aunt apparently freaked out, turned off the projector, and wouldn't watch the rest of the slides. Did you ever go to Scotland to see it? No, I have never had the chance. This happened when I was a child in Canada, and I now live in Australia, which is far away. The next slide was, indeed, of the lake with some ruins further up the hill. Almost anywhere, not that I'd know where to begin. When I was a child, my family discovered the scene of a terrible car accident. Traffic was backed up, and we cautiously made our way past while my parents attempted, but were unsuccessful, to divert our attention from the carnage. Later that evening, the accident was featured on the news. The small town had little else to offer. When the accident scene was shown to us, all 4 of us simultaneously gasped and yelled. Those aren't the same cars. Everything else about the scene was the same, but the cars' makes, models, and colors were entirely different from what we all remembered. We conferred with we all recalled the same thing, but the image on the screen was completely different. We discussed it for months, and I can still clearly recall an elderly African-American man who was very tall, thin, and slender. He wore dress slacks and a button-down shirt, and he had glasses. My great-grandfather passed away in 1977, but I was born in 1991, so I'm not sure if that counts. One day, when I was about 5 or 7 years old, I told my parents everything I knew, and my mother went down to the basement and came back with a single picture. It's exactly who I described, same man, same chair. For example, a car that is always parked in one house has a different color. A place without a fence suddenly has one, and there is an empty lot. I remember my parents taking me home from school a long time ago, and we go down the same road that we've probably been down 100 times, and everything looks different. I think we might have experienced a time slip or parallel universe when we suddenly had a house. My parents thought we were lost, but we eventually found our way back to the main road. I've traveled that route several times to prove myself wrong or to experience a time slip once more. When I was younger, my parents took me to see the Polar Express. It was I thanked her again for taking us to the movies that early in the summer, but she didn't know what I was talking about. Later that year, around Christmas, we went to the movies, and I sat in horror as I watched the first week of Polar Express, knowing exactly what was going to happen. Perhaps you had read the book as a child, didn't you? I can't really recall the plot. I could clearly recall the animation for it. There's probably a good explanation for why I felt the way I did, but it will always be with me. Moreover, I have a very similar story with the same movie. I remember when it came out, and I asked my dad to ask me if I had seen it with his girlfriend at the time. And I even remembered the name of the child of her friend who accompanied us. He replied that I hadn't, and that it was just coming out. I'm going to the movies the following month to see it with his girlfriend, her friend, and her son. It's the same scene as before, with little me in a wig. I was riding in a work truck with my father when I was around 9 or 10 years old. He got a call on his phone, and when he answered it, it went straight to speaker, and a deep, distorted voice began screaming at us, to get out of the truck, or I'll murder you. The strangest thing was that my dad didn't even react, just grabbed the my mom used to work during the day and leave me home alone. When I was around 12 or 13 and too old for daycare, from time to time, she would ring the home phone and end the call. Dude, your dad was involved in some seriously illegal. I hope not. He's pretty cool, and it would be devastating to find out he's done something horrible. Over the course of the day and make sure everything was okay. One day, I'm at home by myself when the phone rings. It's Mom. We have a brief but concise conversation about everything being fine. Yeah, okay, don't answer the door if someone knocks, etc. It's a very typical conversation. So I hang up and continue with my day for barely 15 minutes. My blood went cold, and I still don't know why, but later, the phone rings again, and it's Mom. We exchange hellos, and I joke, must be a slow day. You literally just rang me. Mom becomes extremely silent for a minute before saying, I haven't called you today. I have 3 or so nice suits, but most of them are 6 to 10 years old, have stains, and don't fit right anymore. I got a new one 2 years ago, and it fits me perfectly, and I look sharp. Who called me? We came up with a secret password after that. I'm a little late to the party, but I'm going to share anyway. My dad's funeral was a year later, and I had to go to a funeral, but I couldn't really remember picking it up because I hadn't needed it for anything. I took it to be dry cleaned at the same dry cleaner I've been going to for the past 15 years, which is half a mile down the street from my house. Soon I carefully combed through every item of clothing in my closet, one by one, and searched every surface in search of the suit. When I couldn't find it, I went to check all the other closets in my house, as well as the coat closet in the front hall. I tore this house apart, and I checked my closet several times, but nothing was there. It is not at my house, I think. All right, maybe I just forgot to pick it up from the dry cleaner. It's unlikely, but I might as well go ask. So I go to the dry cleaner and say, hey, long shot, since it would have been more than a year ago, is there any way I might have left a suit here that I forgot to pick up? I've never been a customer here, she says, after giving me my name and phone number. I respond, what do you mean? I know it's been a year or so, but this is literally the only dry cleaner I've ever been to, and I live a half mile down the street. When I ask if the owners or systems have changed recently, she responds that they haven't. They have been the same for the past 10 years. If I have ever been a customer here, it would be listed in the system. I've been coming here for 15 years, and both my parents and my sister have visited. I give her my last name, parents' numbers, and other details, but nothing comes up. No one in my family is listed as having had dry cleaning done there before. And she's staring at me like I'm crazy as I stand there trying to figure out what the happened to my suit. I then head home, prepared to give up and get something else. She may have been too lazy to search for a suit that hasn't been seen in a year, but she took a chance on you being in the wrong place. And after you told her you've been there, my suit was sitting in the middle of the rack in my closet with a tag from the dry cleaner. That just informed me I'd never been there. She turned the computer around, and I watched it pull up all the other names that start with the first 4 letters of my last name. Before she went all in on the commitment to laziness, kind of like the I don't know what a potato is guy. However, when she hit the 5th letter, there were no results. So not many people believe me when I tell this story. And I'm not much of a belief in anything that cannot be demonstrated to me. But here's my strange story or glitch. I was around 13 or 14 years old, living with my parents, and I was in middle school. I've never really had a relationship with my dad because he's always gone for work or the bars due to his drinking problem, so it's always just the two of us, as well as my mom. My mom's side of the family has a history of substance abuse and heavy smoking. My mom's grandmother had been diagnosed with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, but she continued to smoke even after the diagnosis, and her downward spiral continued every day after school. It went from an oxygen tank to nursing homes to the as if being a middle schooler wasn't depressing enough. My grandma had a stroke at one point, which sent her to the hospital, and she eventually went to an home hospice. Every day after school, I would see her with my mom, and it was always so sad to watch her own mother's death and the pain it caused her. Gotten to the point where she was unable to speak and could only groan, which was unsettling to witness as she only spoke in moans. After a few days, she was admitted to hospice care and spent approximately a week in her home in an induced coma, with my mom, 2 uncles, 2 aunts, a nurse, and me. This is where it becomes extremely strange. One night on Amy, mom left me at home on a school night while she went to stay with my 2 uncles and 2 aunts at my grandma's house. I felt very alone, grim, depressed, and just plain ugly. I called my mom before bed because I couldn't stop thinking about it all, and I detested the pain. Nevertheless, I went to sleep as usual with the intention of waking up, and I fell asleep on the bus to school, around 10 or 11, and I recall having a dream in which I was looking down this hallway, when I suddenly saw the silhouette of an elderly woman, and there was an aura surrounding her. I also remember feeling physically as though I had a lot of energy and pressure in my chest, which made me scream and moan in my bed. This roused me, and I kept groaning and screaming due to this strange energy in my chest. I looked and noticed the same silhouette in the corner of my room, and for some reason, I thought of my grandma. I rubbed my eyes, and it vanished. It was 3 a.m., and I will never forget the time, so I called my mother. She was sleeping when she answered, so I inquired right away, "Hey, is Granny okay?" And my mom said she was fine. "Don't worry, just go back to sleep so I can go to school," I said. "Okay," and she called me back less than a minute later, saying that my uncle had apparently entered. I've never believed in any godlike or spiritual-like things, so this was crazy to me. I interpreted it as my grandma saying goodbye before she moved on because we were close. The room a few seconds after my mom got off the phone to tell her that my grandma passed away. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. My own experience is quite similar. I was close to my maternal grandparents, especially my grandfather, who had emphysema and had a poor quality of life for the past few years, but he never let it depress him. In any case, it was summer, and I was spending the weekend at a friend's dad's house, which was about an hour and a half away from where I live. My grandfather was in the hospital but stable. Considering his condition, this was kind of a regular occurrence. I was swimming with my friend when I suddenly felt a terrible, sick feeling of pure dread and sadness that I can't explain. I called my mother right away to check on things, and she assured me that everything was fine. I couldn't get rid of the feeling. So I told my friend's mother that I wasn't feeling well and that I needed to go home. On the way home, I instructed her to drive past the hospital and drop me off at my grandparents' house, because that's where everyone would be. I hadn't spoken to my mother since the first call, but I knew somehow, so she drove me there, and sure enough, my mom's after my grandfather passed away. I discovered that the entire family was assembled there. A few minutes prior to my call, almost exactly at the moment I received that sensation, is by far the most eerie, something I've ever gone through, and I have no suitable justification for it.